Albert Einstein was born at Ulm in Württemberg, Germany, on March 14, 1879, 6 weeks. Later the family moved to Munich, where he later on began his schooling at the Luitpold Gymnasium. Later, they moved to Italy, and Albert continued his education at Aarau, Switzerland, and in 1896 he entered the Swiss Federal Polytechnic School in Zurich to be trained as a teacher in physics and mathematics. In 1901, the year he gained his diploma, he acquired Swiss citizenship, and as he was unable to find a teaching post, he accepted a position as technical assistant in the Swiss Patent Office. In 1905, he obtained his doctor's degree. During his stay at the Patent Office and in his spare time, he produced much of his remarkable work, and in 1908 he was appointed private docent in Bern. In 1909 he became professor extraordinary at Zurich. In 1911, professor of theoretical physics at Prague, returning to Zurich in the following year to fill a similar post. In 1914 he was appointed director of the Kaiser Wilhelm Physical Institute and professor in the University of Berlin. He became a German citizen in 1914 and remained in Berlin until 1933, when he renounced his citizenship for political reasons and emigrated to America to take the position of professor of theoretical physics at Princeton. He became a United States citizen in 1940 and retired from his post in 1945. After World War II, Einstein was a leading figure in the world government movement. He was offered the presidency of the State of Israel, which he declined, and he collaborated with Dr. Chaim Weizmann in establishing the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. Einstein always appeared to have a clear view of the problems of physics and the determination to solve them. He had a strategy of his own and was able to visualize the main stages on the way to his goal. He regarded his major achievements as mere stepping stones for the next advance. At the start of his scientific work, Einstein realized the inadequacies of Newtonian mechanics, and his special theory of relativity stemmed from an attempt to reconcile the laws of mechanics with the laws of the electromagnetic field. He dealt with classical problems of statistical mechanics and problems in which they were merged with quantum theory. This led to an explanation of the Brownian movement of molecules. He investigated the thermal properties of light with a low radiation density, and his observations laid the foundation of the photon theory of light. In his early days in Berlin, Einstein postulated that the correct interpretation of the special theory of relativity must also furnish a theory of gravitation, and in 1916 he published his paper on the general theory of relativity. During this time he also contributed to the problems of the theory of radiation and statistical mechanics. In the 1920s, Einstein embarked on the construction of unified field theories, although he continued to work on the probabilistic interpretation of quantum theory, and he persevered with this work in America. He contributed to statistical mechanics by his development of the quantum theory of a monatomic gas, and he has also accomplished valuable work in connection with atomic transition probabilities and relativistic cosmology. After his retirement, he continued to work towards the unification of the basic concepts of physics, taking the opposite approach, geometrization, to the majority of physicists. Einstein's researches are, of course, well chronicled, and his more important works include Special Theory of Relativity 1905, Relativity English translations, 1920 and 1950, General Theory of Relativity 1916, Investigations on Theory of Brownian Movement 1926, and The Evolution of Physics 1938. Among his known scientific works, About Zionism 1930, Why War 1933, My Philosophy 1934, and Out of My Later Years 1950 are perhaps the most important. Albert Einstein received honorary doctorate degrees in science, medicine, and philosophy from many European and American universities. During the 1920s, he lectured in Europe, America, and the Far East, and he was awarded fellowships or memberships of all the leading scientific academies throughout the world. He gained numerous awards in recognition of his work, including the Copley Medal of the Royal Society of London in 1925 and the Franklin Medal of the Franklin Institute in 1935. Einstein's gifts inevitably resulted in his dwelling much in intellectual solitude, and for relaxation, music played an important part in his life. He married Mileva Merrick in 1903, and they had a daughter and 2 sons. Their marriage was dissolved in 1919, and in the same year he married his cousin, Elsa Wenthel, who died in 1936. He died on April 18, 1955 at Princeton, New Jersey. After graduating from university, Einstein faced major challenges in terms of finding academic positions, having alienated some professors over not attending class more regularly in lieu of studying independently. Albert Einstein was born on March 14, 1879, in Ulm, Württemberg, Germany. He grew up in a secular Jewish family. His father, Hermann Einstein, was a salesman and engineer who, with his brother, founded the Elektrotechnische Fabrik J. Einstein and C., a Munich-based company that mass-produced electrical equipment. Einstein's mother, the former Pauline Koch, ran the family household. Einstein had one sister, Maha, born 2 years after him. Einstein attended elementary school at the Luitpold Gymnasium in Munich. However, he felt alienated there and struggled with the institution's rigid pedagogical style. He also had what were considered speech challenges. However, he developed a passion for classical music and playing the violin, which would stay with him into his later years. Most significantly, Einstein's youth was marked by deep inquisitiveness and inquiry. Toward the end of the 1880s, Max Talmud, a Polish medical student who sometimes dined with the Einstein family, became an informal tutor to young Einstein. Talmud had introduced his pupil to a children's science text that inspired Einstein to dream about the nature of light. Thus, during his teens, Einstein penned what would be seen as his first major paper, the investigation of the state of ether in magnetic fields. Hermann relocated that family to Milan, Italy, in the mid-1890s after his business lost out on a major contract. Einstein was left at a relative's boarding house in Munich to complete his schooling at the Luitpold. Faced with military duty when he turned of age, Einstein allegedly withdrew from classes using a doctor's note to excuse himself and claim nervous exhaustion. With their son rejoining them in Italy, his parents understood Einstein's perspective but were concerned about his future prospects as a school dropout and draft dodger. Einstein was eventually able to gain admission into the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology in Zurich, specifically due to his superb mathematics and physics scores on the entrance exam. He was still required to complete his pre-university education first and thus attended a high school in Aarau, Switzerland, helmed by Jost Wendler. Einstein first proposed a special theory of relativity in 1905 in his paper on the electrodynamics of moving bodies, which took physics in an electrifying new direction. The theory explains that space and time are actually connected, and Einstein called this joint structure space-time. By November 1915, Einstein completed the general theory of relativity, which accounted for gravity's relationship to space-time. Einstein considered this theory the culmination of his life research. He was convinced of the merits of general relativity because it allowed for a more accurate prediction of planetary orbits around the Sun, which fell short in Isaac Newton's theory. It also offered a more expansive, nuanced explanation of how gravitational forces worked. Einstein's assertions were affirmed via observations and measurements by British astronomers Sir Frank Dyson and Sir Arthur Eddington during the 1919 solar eclipse, and thus a global science icon was born. Today, the theories of relativity underpin the accuracy of GPS technology, among other phenomena. Even so, Einstein did make one mistake when developing his general theory, which naturally predicted the universe as either expanding or contracting. Einstein didn't believe this prediction initially, instead holding on to the belief that the universe was a fixed, static entity. To account for this, he factored in a cosmological constant to his equation. His later theories directly contracted this idea and asserted that the universe could be in a state of flux. Then astronomer Edwin Hubble deduced that we indeed inhabit an expanding universe. Hubble and Einstein met at the Mount Wilson Observatory near Los Angeles in 1931. Decades after Einstein's death in 2018, a team of scientists confirmed one aspect of Einstein's general theory of relativity, that the light from a star passing close to a black hole would be stretched to longer wavelengths by the overwhelming gravitational field tracking star S2. Their measurements indicated that the star's orbital velocity increased to over 25 million kph as it neared the supermassive black hole at the center of the galaxy, its appearance shifting from blue to red as its wavelengths stretch to escape the pull of gravity. Einstein's 1905 paper on the matter-energy relationship proposed the equation equals mc. The energy of a body E is equal to the mass m of that body times the speed of light squared c squared. This equation suggested that tiny particles of matter could be converted into huge amounts of energy, a discovery that heralded atomic power. Famed quantum theorist Max Planck backed up the assertions of Einstein, who thus became a star of the lecture circuit and academia, taking on various positions before becoming director of the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute for Physics, today is known as the Max Planck Institute for Physics, from 1917 to 1933. In 1921, Einstein won the Nobel Prize in Physics for his explanation of the photoelectric effect. Since his ideas on relativity were still considered questionable, he wasn't actually given the award until the following year, due to a bureaucratic ruling, and during his acceptance speech, he still opted to speak about relativity. Einstein married Mileva Merrick on January 6, 1903. While attending school in Zurich, Einstein met Merrick, a Serbian physics student. Einstein continued to grow closer to Merrick, but his parents were strongly against the relationship due to her ethnic background. Nonetheless, Einstein continued to see her, with the two developing a correspondence via letters in which he expressed many of his scientific ideas. Einstein's father passed away in 1902, and the couple married shortly thereafter. Einstein and Mavic had 3 children. Their daughter, Lieserl, was born in 1902. Before their wedding, Anne might have been later raised by Merrick's relatives or given up for adoption. Her ultimate fate and whereabouts remain a mystery. The couple also had 2 sons, Hans Albert Einstein, who became a well-known hydraulic engineer, and Edward Ted Einstein, who was diagnosed with schizophrenia as a young man. The Einsteins' marriage would not be a happy one, with the two divorcing in 1919 and Merrick having an emotional breakdown in connection to the split. Einstein, as part of a settlement, agreed to give Merrick any funds he might receive from possibly winning the Nobel Prize in the future. During his marriage to Marek, Einstein had also begun an affair some time earlier with a cousin, Elsa Wentzel. The couple wed in 1919. The same year of Einstein's divorce, he would continue to see other women throughout his second marriage, which ended with Wentzel's death in 1936. In his 40s, Einstein traveled extensively and journaled about his experiences. Some of his unfiltered, private thoughts are shared to volumes of the travel diaries of Albert Einstein. The first volume, published in 2018, focuses on his 5.5-month trip to the Far East, Palestine, and Spain. The scientist started a sea journey to Japan and Marseille, France, in autumn of 1922, accompanied by his second wife, Elsa. They journeyed through the Suez Canal, then to Sri Lanka, Singapore, Hong Kong, Shanghai, and Japan. The couple returned to Germany via Palestine and Spain in March 1923. The second volume, released in 2023, covers 3 months that he spent lecturing and traveling in Argentina, Uruguay, and Brazil in 1925. The travel diaries contain unflattering analyses of the people he came across, including the Chinese, Sri Lankans, and Argentinians, a surprise coming from a man known for vehemently denouncing racism in his later years. In an entry for November 1922, Einstein refers to residents of Hong Kong as industrious, filthy, lethargic people. At the time, the Nazis, led by Adolf Hitler, were gaining prominence with violent propaganda and vitriol in an impoverished post-World War I Germany. The Nazi Party influenced other scientists to label Einstein's work Jewish physics. Jewish citizens were barred from university, work, and other official jobs, and Einstein himself was targeted to be killed. Meanwhile, other European scientists also left regions threatened by Germany and immigrated to the United States with concern over Nazi strategies to create an atomic weapon. Not long after moving and beginning his career at IAS, Einstein expressed an appreciation for American meritocracy and the opportunities people had for free thought, a stark contrast to his own experiences. Coming of age in 1935, Einstein was granted permanent residency in his adopted country and became an American citizen 5 years later. In America, Einstein mostly devoted himself to working on a unified field theory, an all-embracing paradigm meant to unify the varied laws of physics. However, during World War II, he worked on Navy-based weapons systems and made big monetary donations to the military by auctioning off manuscripts worth millions. In 1939, Einstein and fellow physicist Leo Szilard wrote to President Franklin D. Roosevelt to alert him of the possibility of a Nazi bomb and to galvanize the United States to create its own nuclear weapons. The United States would eventually initiate the Manhattan Project, though Einstein wouldn't take a direct part in its implementation due to his pacifist and socialist affiliations. Einstein was also the recipient of much scrutiny and major distrust from FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover. In July 1940, the U.S. Army Intelligence Office denied Einstein a security clearance to participate in the project, meaning J. Robert Oppenheimer and the scientists working in Los Alamos were forbidden from consulting with him. Einstein became a major player in efforts to curtail usage of a bomb. The following year, he and Szilard founded the Emergency Committee of Atomic Scientists, and in 1947, via an essay for the Atlantic Monthly, Einstein espoused working with the United Nations to maintain nuclear weapons as a deterrent to conflict.